4 in this course talks about behavior and attitudes and the interplay between behaviors and attitudes. And if you look up here, we're trying to address these questions. How well do our attitudes predict our behaviors? If I have a favorable attitude towards fresh air, the environment, is that going to produce behavior that's going to plant trees, as we're seeing here, or it's going to do things good for the environment? If my attitude is pro-recycling, does that mean I'm going to be involved in recycling behavior? I'm going to follow through on doing that on a regular basis. How powerful is that? Does that really predict it? It says, the other bullet point here, when does our behavior affect our attitudes? Does getting involved in certain kind of behaviors shift and change the way we feel about things? Does it have that power simply to behave in certain ways? Can that alter my actual attitudes? And then we're asking why. Why does behavior actually affect the attitudes? What goes on with that? Basically, an attitude, as it says there, a favorable or unfavorable evaluation or evaluative reaction towards something or someone. Get myself out of here. A person may have a negative attitude towards coffee, a neutral attitude towards the French, and a positive attitude towards the next door neighbor. So my negative attitude towards coffee keeps me away from Starbucks and other places that serve coffee, or and then the French, I don't know. Don't know much about the French. I'm neutral. I'm indifferent. People next door, I hate them. They're the worst neighbors ever. They're the neighbor from hell. Or, no, we're really fortunate. We've got some good people around us. So how does that affect my interaction with them? Keep my distance from the neighbor from hell. Keep my eye on them. I'm paranoid about them. I have run-ins with them. Or my neighbor on my right, I take the trash can in for them. We bake cookies. We take some over to them. We have a key to their house, etc., etc. It's, these attitudes have a strong effect on it. The ABCs down here, it just shows the interplay between behavior, cognition is our thinking, the way we think about things, and then affect is our feelings, basically. This part up here, Leon Fessinger, we'll talk more about him, especially when we're discussing cognitive dissonance. Changing people's attitudes often hardly affects their behavior. So if we are able to change somebody's attitude towards the French, it doesn't necessarily mean that their behavior is going to have a big shift, or rather, not their behavior, but the effects of the behavior. So Fessinger believed that attitude-behavior relationship works the other way around, with our behavior as the horse and our attitudes as the cart. The behavior pulls the attitudes, basically. Robert Abelson said, very well trained and very good, that we are very well trained and very good at finding reasons for what we do. I can explain to you why I do what I do, but not very good at doing what we find reasons for, which is kind of interesting. So how well do our attitudes actually predict our behavior? Well, according to this, you can see here, people's expressed attitudes hardly predicted their varying behaviors. Students' attitudes towards cheating bore little relationship to the likelihood of their cheating. Yeah, no, I don't believe in cheating. I think it's wrong. But under certain circumstances or under the right kind of conditions, I might cheat, or maybe I have cheated. Attitudes towards church were only moderately linked. We're only moderately linked with worship attendance on any given Sunday. Self-described racial attitudes predicted little clue to behaviors in actual situations. In the example there, many people say they are upset when someone makes a racist remark. Yet, when they hear racism, such as someone using the N-word, they respond indifferently. So again, we can't always predict somebody's behavior by what they adhere to or what they proclaim. The example down here, attitudes and behavior misaligned. After former U.S. Congressman Mark Souder, staff member Tracy Jackson together recorded a pro-abstinence video, news broke that the two had been having an affair outside of their marriage. You'll go crazy if you don't have some sense of irony, the family values advocate told the local newspaper. So, those kind of things really rub us wrong when we hear somebody that is, that's in the media or often in the media and sharing strong points of view and a lot that come from their worldview. But then the behavior doesn't match up. We find out they're having an affair. We find out they're stealing money, or we find out it really infuriates us. And so again, we can't always predict the behavior based on what people proclaim and what people share about their attitudes. When attitudes predict behavior, it says our attitudes do predict our behavior when those other influences on what we say and do are minimal. When the attitude is specific to the behavior and when the attitude is potent, that's a better predictor. It says, unlike a doctor measuring heart rate, social psychologists never get a direct reading on attitudes. Rather, we measure expressed attitudes. What people say, it doesn't always capture the inner feelings. It's what they tell us. Like other behaviors, expressions are subject to outside influences. Sometimes, for example, we say what we think others want to hear, much as legislators may vote for a popular war or tax reduction that they privately oppose. So it's hard to get at this. I think social psychologists struggle. One way we try to is, get at this, what we call implicit, if you look right here, the implicit or the unconscious attitude. That's what we really want to try to get at. Because the explicit or the conscious attitudes might be sort of covering up what's implicit or underneath. So there's some ways to do this. The implicit association test, which is really interesting to take. Some people don't always like the results of it, but it's the most widely used attitude measure. Uses reaction times to measure how quickly people associate concepts. One can, for example, measure implicit or unconscious racial attitudes by assessing whether white people take longer to associate positive words with black faces than with white faces. Implicit attitude researchers have offered various IAT assessments online. Here's the website right here. This is a great place to go. They've got multiple tests that you can take. They're supposed to reveal some of these implicit biases that we might have. From the serious, do you implicitly associate men with careers and women with home? To the amusing, do you prefer Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings? So I encourage you guys to visit the site and try some of these implicit association tests. It says, here's some of the things we know about it. Implicit biases are pervasive. It says, for example, 80% of people show more implicit dislike for the elderly compared with the young. People differ in implicit bias depending on their group memberships, their conscious attitudes, and the bias in their immediate environment. Some people exhibit more implicit bias than others. And then people are often unaware of their implicit biases. We don't know. We say one thing, we express some things, we truly believe that we're unbiased, but what this reveals is that there might be some subconscious tendencies, some subconscious biases that we're completely unaware of, which is the cool thing about taking the test. So one of the questions that comes up is, do implicit biases predict behavior? This is a review of available research. Hundreds of investigators have revealed that both explicit, what you say, your self-report, and implicit, the things you might be unaware of, help predict people's behaviors and judgments. It says both together predict behavior better than either one of those alone. So the combination of the implicit attitude and what we say, and if they match up, it's going to have a better predictor of how we'll behave and what we'll do. But if you take one or the other, what I say or what you find with the implicit bias test, that's not powerful enough. It's either one. I'm not saying it doesn't have any influence, but the two together are what we can really then take and then predict if somebody's going to follow through. It says behavior predictions range from dental flossing to the fate of romantic relationships to suicide attempts. For attitudes formed early in life, such as racial or gender attitudes, implicit and explicit attitudes frequently diverge, with implicit attitudes often predicting behavior better. So when it comes to some of these ones that are formed early, what we believe about men and women, what we believe about different racial groups, those things are going to be powerful. They're going to have a better predicting quality rather than what we say. It says, for example, implicit racial attitudes have successfully predicted interracial roommate relationships, whether they're going to go well or go poorly, and willingness to penalize other race people. It says, for other attitudes, I'm looking right here, such as those related to consumer behavior and support for political candidates, keeps automatically doing that. Explicit reports are better. So when it comes to what we're going to buy, what we're going to purchase, who we're going to vote for, what we say, our self-reports, are good at predicting if we'll follow through on that. So remember, the early stuff, attitudes that are formed early in life, the implicit stuff works better. But for things that have to do with purchases, things that have to do with who we're going to vote for and so forth, we can take people kind of at their word on that. This principle of aggregation here, it says the effects of an attitude become more apparent. They become more apparent when we look at the average, basically. A person's aggregate or their average behavior. That's a better predicting quality that'll help us. This took a look. It says people's general attitude towards religion poorly predicts whether they go to worship services during the coming week, because attendance is also influenced by the weather, worship leader, how one is feeling that day, and so forth. But religious attitudes predict the total quality, or quantity rather, of religious behaviors over time across many situations. That kind of is demonstrating the principle of aggregation. This is an example here. It says when attitudes specific to behavior are examined. So you can look at the attitude towards the behavior. I'm talking about jogging here. I'm for physical fitness. Yes, I am. So that is a positive attitude. Subjective norms. My neighbors seem to be jogging and going to the gym. That's what I'm witnessing. That's what I'm seeing. It's my subjective opinions. I don't know really how often they're going, but they appear to be involved in it. And then perceived control. Control. Key word here when it comes to whether we're going to be involved in behavior, follow through. I could easily do this. Yes, I have the ability to make this happen. If I could not easily do this, it might really hinder what's going to actually happen here. Even though I might have a favorable attitude, subjective norms look good, but if I don't have control, if I don't feel like I have some control, it's going to really minimize the effect of these two. But I do have control here, so I'm going to start next week. Yes, behavior, the follow-through, good chance it's going to happen. Good predictive quality there. So when attitudes are potent, that also is a good predictor of behavior. And a couple ways here: bringing attitudes to mind, and also forging strong attitudes through experience. This part up here says, if we are prompted to think about our attitudes before acting, would we be truer to ourselves? The research shows yes. Our attitudes become potent if we think about them, or if we're made self-aware. 2 weeks after 120 of the University of Minnesota students indicated their attitudes towards affirmative action employment policies, Snyder and Swan invited them to act as jurors in a self-discrimination court case. The participants' attitudes predicted verdicts only for those who were first induced to remember their attitudes. They were asked to remember their attitudes before, by giving them a few minutes to organize their thoughts and views on the affirmative action issue, which helped make it more potent. This part here, too, make them more self-aware. Perhaps by, so suggest that another way to induce people to focus on their inner convictions, having them act in front of a mirror. When you look yourself in a mirror, it makes you more self-aware. This induces, or makes it more potent, that we're going to be able to predict behavior then. Entering a larger, it says, making people self-aware in this way promotes consistency between words and then what they do. And this experiment here, and you can read through it when you get a chance, but it basically says that when we're having people do things in front of a mirror, they're more likely to follow through. And, the people that didn't have the mirror, 71% cheated by working past the spell. Only 7% cheated when they had to do it in front of a mirror. So, down here, it makes one wonder, would eye-level mirrors in stores make people more self-conscious of their attitudes about stealing? Probably. Research says that if we're seeing ourselves in the mirror, it makes us reflect, it makes us become more aware, and more likely to go by the rules rather than cheat, rather than steal.